You cannot manage what you do not measure. Michael, what does that mean?
Exactly like you pointed it, but how much detail do you want to get into? It's one thing to look at your profiles or to look at your collision miles or for per miles traveled. Anything that you want to measure, you can plot it out on a graph and something as simple as possible. Use something high level like that just to indicate what the initial problems are. But when you start to find out what those individual issues are, now you have to start diving in a little bit deeper. But if you don't track what it is that you're watching, it's like steering a transatlantic freighter across the ocean and just looking at the bow. You have to have a point focus to where you're going in order to get there. So be it as basic as you want. I got to start with my mother was a financial controller for a 7-company consortium, and I thought, what a freaking boring job that is. And I was so resistant to any kind of a numbers. I did everything to stay away from it. But when I started working in this industry on the safety side of things, I quickly realized just how important they were, and now I love them. Data to me is hugely important, and I don't care how simple you start with recording where you are, so any changes you make to the company, you can realize if you're getting better or worse. That's what it is.
Chris, you obviously get into doing some measuring of sorts when you're working with your clients. Is there more that you can add to what Mr. MD's thrown on the table?
Well, one of the measurements that I would encourage everybody to do is accidents per million miles or crashes per million miles. When I was doing the safety job for the insurance industry, very few of those clients measured collisions per million miles. And yet there's a contest every year TCA holds, and that's exactly what it is. Crashes per million miles, and Bison continues to win it. A great Canadian company continues to win the overall. I think it was 7 out of 10 years they won the overall safety award, and that's one of the things they measure it. So the beauty of measuring crashes per million miles is it's often public what their crash rate per million miles was. So even the smallest companies can compare themselves to a top-notch company like a Bison when you see that. So I would really encourage you to, it's a very simple calculation. I would encourage you to do it, track it, and again, publicize it. Let your drivers know how they're doing.
But from an enforcement perspective, what are the MTO measuring? Other than we know roadside inspections and stuff like that, but obviously they've got the same approach. You can't manage what you don't measure. They're wanting to measure what's going up and down the road and manage it somehow. What's MTO? How was their approach on this?
Yeah, that's why you startled me, because I was deep in thought about that.
Good.
And what I was thinking was the three on the panel are experts at what you're talking about. What are the various tools available to measure this? And what I would say is, from the MTO perspective, it's more of a case of, so you've dealt with these folks, you have this now. Do you have clear direction to your, I'm kind of jumping a couple of things ahead here, but do you have some policies around that clearly identify who's going to do that, what specifically are they going to do, on what degree of regularity, and then what do you have that you can show me that supports that you're actually doing that? And it's kind of been mentioned, about doing things before bad things happen. When you sit in an interview in St. Catharines, when you sit at a show cause, and if you got a good violation rate, that doesn't mean you won't end up there, because we've talked about what the ministry calls a major event. So a wheel off where somebody's seriously injured is a major event. An impound is a major event. A collision where somebody's seriously injured is a major event. And we've worked with many clients with a 20% violation rate that are still being taken into St. Catharines because of a major event. Well, if you can go in there with policies and a manual that clearly outline the stuff and the telematics, for lack of a better word, and the availability and who you have specifically assigned to do that, and instances or paperwork, electronic, to support that that you're doing that, and ideally, this is what we found, this is how we corrected it. I can't tell you how much better that makes that meeting go than when you go and say, so far we've done nothing, but now, are we ever gonna go hard now? We know you are, or we'll shut you down, not we, but the deputy registrar will.
Well, and I know, talking from the deputy register, that's not their main course of action. They don't want to put you out of business. They just want you to be a better motor carrier. So, okay, so we need to measure. So let's talk a little bit about some of those items that we can measure. So we've mentioned carrier safety profiles. So your CVOR, your SMS report, your loss run, different things like that. But let's kind of drill down a little bit. Let's get a little more granular as to what some of those items are, Michael.
Oh, you saw me grab the microphone, eh? You can, if I'm speaking to customers or potential customers, I can say, well, what is it that you're measuring? And they'll tell me, okay, so you're measuring your SMS or you're measuring your CVR. What are you looking for? Well, I'm looking at my ISS, or I'm looking at my basics. Okay, so what's your problem? Oh, I so often I get the proud response, and I'm not knocking you, but I'll get, oh, maintenance. Okay, that's one, but what specifically inside maintenance? Oh, well, hang on a second. They'll look through quickly and go, brakes. Okay, now we're getting somewhere. Specifically inside brakes. So when you're measuring your information, when you're measuring your data points, this is the raw data that you've got to get down into, and then try to find out why specifically I'm having an issue with that particular problem, with that particular component. It might be something that is indicative of driver abuse. It might be something that's indicative of your environment. It might be an issue that's indicative with just extreme mileage or lack of maintenance. You can't determine what that issue is if you're not measuring right down to the core details. So start with basics, but once you can highlight some particular items, start to dive and dig down deeper.
Bonnie, what else would you be looking at? Especially from an insurer's perspective, what is it you guys are looking at or looking for that the insured is digging deep down on as part of that measurement practice?
Not necessarily BLT related, but absolutely we're looking at recruiting and retention numbers. So we want to know if you're tracking that. Do you have a sense of how many drivers you've added to your fleet over the last year? And do you know exactly why those who left? Do you conduct those post-exit interviews? Do you get a sense of what's happening there? Because when you want to talk, so just if I could very quickly, safety costs money. Safety does not generate revenue, it costs money. And many companies, that's where the hinge comes in everything we're talking about today, because it's anything you're doing in terms of tracking has to come with the support of ownership and senior management. If you're going to be effective in these programs, it's got to start there, right? That's where it has to be, and they should be involved in understanding the goals of the data you're trying to retrieve. Absolutely what Chris said. Collisions per million mile, right? You want to know the frequency of which things are happening. I love it if people have, as Mike said, drilled down through their carrier profiles, and they can say, they've looked at the same data I've looked at. They know exactly what their problems are and have started to focus in on how to change those issues. Is it older units, right? Because we've certainly gone through a long period of time where new equipment, it's either not available or the price tag on it, I've never seen so many zeros. You think, really, is that for a piece of equipment, right? So we're hanging on to our stuff longer. We're requiring more extensive maintenance. And when it comes to maintenance, I love it if a company can say to me with an older power unit, we keep a cost fix analysis on all our equipment, right? So we know where the break point is, right? We know when we can't do this. We can't do another major repair because this unit has cost us all that we're going to allow. We're either going to put it out of service because that's going to eliminate issues at scale, potential issues for the driver that they don't need to incur, right? So those are kind of some of the over and above things, John, that I think I like to see carriers do.